Revised Unit Plan on Multiplying and Dividing While Using Decimals and Dividing Fractions by Jamie Wallace. The next unit my 6th grade students will be learning about is dividing with fractions and adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing while using decimals. I'm using a unit from the curriculum called Ready Common Core. It will address the Common Core standards 6NS-A1, 6NS-B2, and 6NS-B3. Why is this so important? The rationale for transforming this lesson is that in order to be an effective teacher, it is important to consider all students' learning styles, create assessments that inform my practice, incorporate technology in a meaningful way, infuse story problems that have real-world applications. By the end of this unit, my students should be able to say, I can fluently multiply and divide multi-digit decimals using the standard algorithm for each operation. I understand the role of place value in the operation of multiplication and division. I can identify when it is appropriate to use the standard algorithm. I can use estimation to approximate products and quotients, and they should also be able to say, I can model the operations of multiplication and division with manipulatives, diagrams, and story contexts for multi-digit decimals. I will be using many different types of assessments throughout this unit. Vanderwall, Karp, and Bay-Williams believe that much can be learned from a public discussion, followed by the student trying to solve the problem on their own. I will also be using a writing prompt in my students' reflective journal. According to Vanderwall, writing is both a learning and assessment opportunity. My students will be estimating specific answers and discussing their estimates with a table group. This is an example of student self-assessment. Most of the assessments I will be doing during this lesson is by observation. I will be gathering this information by what my students say during group discussions and what they write on their dry erase boards. Van Wall believes that observations can help to inform the way lessons continue. This is something that I follow on a daily basis. If the majority of my students are continually putting up wrong answers on their boards, I know that I need to do some reteaching. My observations will also help me to determine with whom I will be spending one-on-one time with while the other students are working individually to complete the day's lesson. The final assessment for this lesson is a summative assessment. In my students' journals, I will be asking the question, why is multiplying by 1/2 the same thing as dividing by 2? According to Vanderwall, there are 4 steps to teaching problem solving. Number 1, understand the problem. Number 2, devise a plan. Number 3, carry out the plan. And number 4, looking back. In order for my students to better understand the problem, I will present a table with decimals and ask the students to round to the nearest whole number. I will then give the students sample problems for them to be adding and subtracting using decimals. Once I feel that the students are strong enough to solve problems using adding and subtracting with decimals, I'm going to present my first word problem. The students will then be asked to, using the sample problems we used as a warm-up, create 2 addition and subtraction word problems. Once I am sure that the students understand the problem, we will move on to the next phase. Stage 2 consists of devising a plan. The students are trying to create a way to solve the problem. Step 3, my students will be asked to carry out the plan. And the last problem-based task process is looking back. Does my answer make sense? Earlier in the lesson, we did a lot of estimating, so hopefully by this time, they will know if their answer makes sense. Here is the extension problem-based task to this lesson. Students will write a word problem about a mishap with adding or subtracting decimals. For example, the other day when I went to the store, I was mentally adding what my total bill was going to cost. I had estimated that I was going to pay around $45, but when the cashier rang up my total, I realized that I had estimated incorrectly. What are some potential mistakes I could have made? If I truly want to assess my students' knowledge of division with fractions and multiple functions with decimals, I will need to assess in a manner that is suitable to multiple learning styles. To accommodate the verbal linguistic learners, I will do an activity called Think, Pair, Share. I will pose a question to the class, and the students have a little bit of time to think about the answer. The students will then pair with a partner. Once they are paired with their partner, they will share their answers with each other. For my musical learners, I will have them create a song about the rules to divide fractions and decimals. For my logical mathematical learners, I will be doing a lot of direct instruction. I will also be incorporating fill-in-the-blank type puzzles to finish the sequencing of dividing with decimals. I will also create story problems related to current lesson directives. To accommodate my spatial learners, I'm going to incorporate tables and graphs. To help my kinesthetic learners learn better, I'm going to use manipulatives. They will be allowed to move around the room to choose new partners. And lastly, they will be asked to draw pictures that represent fractions. My interpersonal learners will get to do group activities and group discussions. My interpersonal learners will be doing a lot of work in their vocab journal and their reflection journal. Throughout this unit lesson, I will be doing many things to accommodate my ELL and ESOL students. One of the first things I'm going to do is have the students write and say the following numbers: 10, 100, 1,000. Then I'm going to have a student come to the board to write the correct number that corresponds with the term. I'm going to repeat this activity, but this time write and say 1/10, 1/100th, and 1/1000. Then I'm going to have the students write the corresponding number under the fractions, and as a class have the students practice saying decimals as the tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. During the final vocab assessment, the students can use examples from the classroom discussions that we had. They can also use Table 2 in order to complete their word problem. I will strategically pair students, I will use manipulatives, and I will use real-world examples. As a class, we will discuss the difference between divided by and divided into. Example, dividing by asks how many groups of 1/4 are in a number. By dividing into fourths means to separate a number into 4 equal groups. Multiplication charts will be available to all of my students. Another activity I will be using is I'm going to write the words left and right on the board. Under the words, I'm going to indicate the direction each word represents by an arrow. I'm going to discuss the multiple meanings of each word. Right could also equal correct, and left can also equal to leave. I'm going to have the students represent each word by a physical movement. Example, everyone stand up and move 3 steps to the left. Now move 3 steps to the right. Before the final assessment over this entire unit, we will be playing a game. Before the game, I'm going to give the students who are on IEPs access to the questions the day prior to the game in order for them to work out their answers beforehand. They must show all of their work in order to participate in the game. By doing this, I am ensuring that they worked it out on their own without the use of a calculator. Adding Kahoot to my lesson will enhance it significantly because my students will be engaged. Vandewaal, Karp, and Bay Williams believe that technology should engage students, and this game has never failed to engage my students. This resource is also extremely motivating. Oftentimes, students who do not actively participate in daily lessons are extremely motivated to win this game, and motivating students is a sign that the technology is serving its purpose. Technology should also allow for teacher control, and Kahoot allows a teacher to create the lesson and modify almost all aspects of how it's presented. Because I have the ability to modify the questions, I can assure that it is enhancing to the learning environment. I can also ensure that the language that is being used is accessible for all of my students, and at the same time my learning objectives are being met. Kahoot allows me to vary the levels of difficulty for the questions that I ask, and in doing so, my lower level students will achieve some level of success, while at the same time they are being exposed to higher level questions. Van de Waal states, perhaps the most important work of teachers today is to be able to plan and teach lessons that support and challenge all students. Ensuring learning for all. Throughout this unit, I will have been doing lots of different assessments to ensure that all of my students are learning. And if at any time I felt that learning was not occurring, I would reteach. Our state has adopted the Common Core. Because we have adopted the Common Core curriculum, every spring we take a test called the Smarter Balanced Test. This test helps to assess the learning that has been done throughout the school year. The curriculum that I teach out of this year is called Ready Common Core. It is aligned with the Common Core curriculum. These are the test questions taken from my curriculum that align with the Common Core that are from the unit that I just taught. When my students succeed on this test, this will be the best way for me to determine that my students have learned the concepts. As teachers, we fail all the time. This quote is absolutely true, and my first period class can attest to this. Oftentimes the lesson I teach first period is drastically different than the lesson I teach 8th period. It is through this trial and error reflection that I will become a better teacher. Teaching at the school that I teach at currently can be a struggle at times. The ability levels in my classroom range from 1st grade all the way to 6th grade. Finding a medium ground sometimes is extremely difficult, and this is why, while I was reconstructing my unit lesson, I intentionally planned for the different ability levels I have in my classes. Van de Waal believed that planning and teaching lessons that challenge all students is perhaps the most important component to teaching. Being able to differentiate my instruction while planning my unit lesson has been really important. In the future, when I am creating unit lesson plans, I plan on making sure I use a lot of the strategies I learned from this class. I will keep the book from this course because even now I am constantly referring back to it to better inform my practice. I will also make it a priority to accommodate all of the different learning styles. My overriding concern is being able to reach all of the different levels in my class, and I believe my focus will be stationed on teaching math vocabulary and estimation skills.